In August 1966, two electronics technicians from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, set out on a strange and ultimately fatal journey. Their names were Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana. Both men were in their 30s, skilled at their trade, and described as intelligent, hardworking, and well-respected within their community. They were close friends who shared an interest in subjects that sat at the edges of conventional science: paranormal experiments, spiritualism, and reports of extraterrestrial life. In a decade when UFO sightings and occult fascination were surging worldwide, these two men believed they might be on the verge of something extraordinary. On August 17, 1966, the men told their families they were traveling to buy some electronic equipment. Instead, they boarded a bus bound for the small city of Niterói, across Guanabara Bay from Rio. They carried with them a modest sum of cash, some tools, and a peculiar shopping list. Witnesses later said they stopped at a local bar to buy bottled water. They were calm, businesslike, and gave no impression of what was about to unfold. 3 days later, on August 20th, a young man flying a kite stumbled upon a disturbing scene on Vintém Hill. There, lying on the grass in a small clearing, were the bodies of Manuel and Miguel. The discovery immediately drew crowds and eventually the police. The men were arranged neatly side by side, almost as if placed there deliberately. They were dressed in matching formal suits, covered by raincoats, despite the warm summer weather. Most chillingly, both men wore strange homemade masks over their faces. These masks were cut from thick sheets of lead, roughly shaped and fastened to cover the entire upper part of the face. They had no holes for eyes or mouth. They were not artistic or ceremonial, but industrial, as if the men had taken scraps of lead and fashioned them into crude visors. To this day, no one knows exactly why. Next to the bodies, police discovered a small notebook. At first, its contents seemed ordinary: lists of parts, references to technical equipment, notes that might have belonged to any electronics worker. But one entry stood out, scrawled in Portuguese in hurried handwriting. Translated, it read, 1630 be at the specified location, 1830 ingest capsules, after effect protect metals, await signal, mask. The meaning was unclear, but the phrasing suggested a planned ritual or experiment. Capsules, protect metals, await a signal, and the masks, were they part of the plan? The men's personal effects were also puzzling. They still carried money, watches, and other items of value. There was no sign of robbery. Their bodies showed no visible injuries, no cuts, no bullet wounds, no signs of violence. They had not struggled. Both appeared simply to have laid down and died. The police ordered an autopsy, but in a decision that has haunted the case ever since, the coroner failed to perform a toxicology test in time. Weeks passed before samples were requested, and by then the bodies had decomposed too much to yield results. Whether they had ingested poison, overdosed on drugs, or suffered from some other cause remains unknown. Officially, the cause of death was listed as undetermined. That failure closed off the most direct path to solving the mystery. Theories quickly proliferated. The first centered on spiritualism. In Brazil during the 1960s, interest in spiritualist practices and the occult was widespread. Mediums claimed to contact the dead. UFO clubs were popular, and fringe groups experimented with ways of contacting extraterrestrial life or higher planes of existence. Manuel and Miguel were said to be fascinated with such topics. Friends later told investigators they had previously experimented with strange devices and rituals. It was suggested that the men believed the capsules would open their minds. The lead masks would protect them from dangerous radiation or blinding light, and that they would await a signal from beyond, perhaps from beings not of this world. Witnesses in Niterói even claimed to have seen unusual lights in the sky the night the men likely died. Another theory suggested they were conducting an experiment with hallucinogenic drugs. The notes reference to ingest capsules could imply LSD or some other mind-altering substance taken to heighten psychic powers. Under this view, the men may have overdosed or suffered lethal side effects. The masks, in this case, could represent a misguided attempt at shielding themselves from imagined dangers. The problem is that no drugs were ever found. And again, without toxicology, no one could confirm if they were under the influence. There is also the hypothesis that they were part of a secretive group of technicians experimenting with advanced electronics. The phrase protect metals has been interpreted as a technical reference, suggesting they were trying to shield sensitive equipment from radiation or magnetic interference. The lead masks might have been intended to protect their own vision if they anticipated bright flashes of light from some device. If this was true, then perhaps their experiment went wrong. An accidental overdose of radiation, a chemical exposure, or a miscalculation that cost them their lives. But no equipment was ever recovered at the scene. The raincoats add another layer of strangeness. Why would two men wear heavy coats in summer heat while climbing a hillside? Were they expecting rain, protecting themselves from chemicals, or did the coats have some ritual meaning? No explanation has been satisfactory. There were also rumors of a third party. Could someone else have given them the instructions? The notebook's phrasing, short, imperative, almost like orders, suggests it might not have been written by them at all. Were they following directions from someone they trusted, perhaps even manipulated by a cult leader, a charismatic figure, or another technician experimenting with them? If so, who was this mysterious figure, and why did they vanish without a trace? The press in Brazil seized on the case, publishing lurid headlines. Some emphasized the UFO connection, especially after locals swore they saw glowing orange lights near the hillside. Others highlighted the spiritualist angle, portraying the men as victims of obsession. For years afterward, the lead masks became shorthand in Brazil for bizarre and unexplained deaths. But for all the speculation, hard evidence remains elusive. No drugs, no poison, no clear cause of death, no third party identified. Just two men lying peacefully on a hill, faces hidden behind blank sheets of lead, as if waiting for something that never arrived. Over time, the case faded from headlines, but never from public imagination. Paranormal researchers cite it as one of the strongest examples of a modern-day mystery. Skeptics point out the failures of the investigation, saying the mystery is unsolvable only because of incompetence. Others argue the strangeness is the point, that the very lack of explanation is why the story endures. And yet, certain details keep the case alive in the public mind. The masks themselves, photographed and archived, remain deeply unsettling. Unlike ceremonial masks, which are often ornate, these were blank, featureless, devoid of expression. They turned the men into faceless figures, robbed of identity. Combined with the instruction, await signal, the imagery is haunting. Two men on a hillside, eyes blind, waiting silently for something that never came. The families of Manuel and Miguel never received closure. They were told little, offered no definitive answers, and had to accept that their loved ones had died under inexplicable circumstances. To this day, no relative or investigator has uncovered additional evidence. The case remains officially unsolved, locked in the archives of Brazilian law enforcement as one of their strangest files. Nearly 60 years later, the lead mask case continues to provoke debate. Were the men victims of delusion, science gone wrong, or something more sinister? Did they stumble upon forces they could not control, chemical, extraterrestrial, or human? Or were they simply men caught in the grip of dangerous beliefs whose attempt to touch the unknown led them to their deaths? What is certain is this: the image of those two bodies lying in the grass beneath the Brazilian sun, with crude lead masks covering their faces, will never stop raising questions. It is a picture of mystery, obsession, and the human hunger to push past the limits of knowledge. even at the cost of life itself. The lead mask's case remains one of the world's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. Some secrets stay buried in official reports, but others, like this one, linger because they resist every explanation. Were Manuel and Miguel visionaries, madmen, or pawns in a game far larger than themselves? We may never know. All we can do is return to the hillside in our minds, imagine the silence, and remember that 2 men once laid down there, waiting for a signal no one else ever heard. Comment, like, and subscribe for more deep mysteries that leave history with no answers.